In this example, I will walk through how to diagram an argument using Venn diagrams, and then analyze that argument to see if the diagram to see if the argument is valid or invalid. So the first thing we need to do is put the syllogism into standard form, symbolizing all the statements appropriately. So the first step is actually to identify the conclusion in the argument. Because until we do that, we can't know which terms are the minor terms and the major terms. So the conclusion is some birds are not aardvarks. You can tell that because of the conclusion indicator, so. So S, the minor term, is birds, and P, the major term, is aardvarks. And then the middle term will be what's left over, mammals. Okay, and then we need to write out the conclusion and the major premise and the minor premise. I'm going to start with the conclusion. So some S are not P. Then the major premise, so that will be the premise that contains aardvarks, so all P are M, all aardvarks are mammals. And then finally, some mammals are not birds. So some M are not S. And we want to underline that. So that's part of our standard form. Okay, so now we can do a Venn diagram for this argument. So we're going to start with the universal premise. So all P are M. I want to start by filling in the section of P that is not M. Because if there are any P's, then they're M's. Alright, that'll do. Then we want to do some M are not S. So we want to look at the circle for M and look at the part that's not in S. But the X could go here, or it could go in this part that overlaps with P. We can't be sure. So we need to put our box on right on the line. Let's try for that. So make the box transparent. And take away the line. Alright, good enough. Then we determine whether the argument is valid or invalid by looking at the diagram and seeing if the conclusion is diagrammed after having done the premises. So the conclusion is some S are not P. So if that was going to be diagrammed, there would have to be an X somewhere in this area of S that is not P. And we can see that that's not the case. So this argument is invalid. Now we can double check that by also identifying a syllogistic fallacy that the argument commits. Because any argument that's invalid commits at least one syllogistic fallacy, perhaps more. So we look at the argument and we see that in the conclusion the major term is distributed, but it's not distributed in the major premise. So it commits the fallacy of illicit major. It also turns out to be the case that the middle term is undistributed in both premises. So it also commits the fallacy of undistributed middle. So it's possible it maybe even commits more fallacies, but that's definitely enough. As soon as you've found one fallacy, you know it's invalid. So if I'm asking you what fallacy it commits, you only need to tell me one.